Hello guys, my name is Khan, and actually in this video we will make about this kind of dashboard. So as you can see that even in that dashboard we have titled it like that we will construct a dynamic user interface. So what does it mean by dynamic? So as you guys have noticed in my previous videos that whenever we were selecting any options in our user interface, our main panel got updated accordingly. But in this video, I will show you guys that how if you select any value in user interface, it updates the other cell's value. So in this example, what I will be doing, actually in this video, we will be doing two data sets completely different from each other. One data set is related to cars and the second data set is related to employment. So as you can see that currently I have selected the car data and so here we can see that it's saying select x-axis for this graph. So you can select it. So I can select any other variable and you can see that the graph got updated. And the same as we have y-axis, which is also contains the variable names which are coming from this car data. And if I select it, it got updated. But suppose if I change my data, so there are two options, the car underscore data and the employment. Suppose if I select employment underscore data. So if you see here now, there are three variables because there are three variables under employment data. My select input boxes got updated according to the data I have selected here. So that's why we call that kind of phenomena as a dynamic user interface. Our values within our user interface got updated according to the options you have selected within the user interface. And previously we already know that we were creating dynamic main panel, but this time we were also creating a dynamic user interface. So in order to show you guys that how you can create a dynamic user interface, so I will start constructing my R code file just from the scratch, and we will be using again the RSHINY library. So I will just close this window. So I will open RStudio, from where we will start making our dashboard from scratch. So I will open our script. I will just open it into a separate window, and from here we will start writing down our code just from the scratch. So the first thing that I will do, I will call the library that I will be using. So for this code I will be using just RSHINY library. So I'll go in library RSHINY. So this is the library that we guys will be using. Enter. So, and the second thing that I would like to do, I will set my working directory where my data sets will be located. As I told you guys before that we will be using two data sets for this video. Go to my dynamic user interface. So these are the two data sets that we will be using. I can even open it up for you guys to show what kind of. So as you can see that the car data contains price, MPG and these variables, whereas if I go to the other data set, the employment underscore data, it contains only three variables: year, employment and population. And I will close it down too. So what I will do, I will just copy the path of that folder where my data sets are located. And I will say set working directory. Within that I will be pasting the path. Again, I don't need to mention the file name because I just want to mention the folder path. So okay, so I have already uploaded the RSHINY library. The next thing will be that we will, as always, we will be defining first user interface. It's not necessary that you define user interface first, but I really like to start from the user interface. I will creating an object UI. Again, you can name whatever you want to do, whatever you want to give this object. So UI, then I will be first using the shiny function, which is shiny UI. Actually, I think because it's not working properly, because I have to adjust because when I pasted this path, R will not recognize until I convert these slashes into forward slashes. And I think it's better to save this file too. So again, I will be using it within my shiny and I will be using I'm using a folder, dynamic UI. Let's save it like dynamic UI. Save. So I will be using shiny UI function, and within that I will be using fluid page. I think in most of my videos I've used the fluid page. And within the fluid page, the first thing we will define is the title. The title panel, which will be containing the title of our dashboard. I'll say title panel. And after that, so what's the title I want to give? I want to write down here it as, we will construct dynamic UI. So we will construct dynamic UI. And after that, within the title, after the title panel, but within the fluid page op function, I will be using further two options, which is the first one is the sidebar layout, and within the sidebar layout, the first thing that I want to define is that I want my sidebar to be on the right side, or my user interface will be on the right hand side. So therefore, I will be mentioning position is equal to right. You can also have it on left or right. I usually prefer it on right side. And after that, I will be using my other function within the sidebar layout, which is the sidebar panel, and where I will define different user interfaces like text inbox or select input. So therefore I will be defining sidebar panel, and within the sidebar panel, first I like to give a heading. So in order to give a heading, I will be saying, so H4 we usually use it for heading. If you want to give any headings, so my heading will be, I want to give it dynamic UI. And after that, within the sidebar layout function, I will define my second function that I would like to give within sidebar panel, which is the select input. I will select input, and within the select input, the ID variable which I want to, so the input ID that I want to create is named as data. And after that, I will be giving my select input a title. So I'll be mentioning here like select the data from here. So, but in the end, after that, I like to give the dataset's name here. So I will create a vector. I know what are the names of my dataset. So the first data is named as car underscore data, whereas the second dataset is named as EMP. underscore data. So these are the data sets name will appear when the user will select the select input button, which will be appearing within my sidebar layout. And after that, what I will do, I will press comma. I will come back to this select input, this sidebar layout function again, but and after that I will create my main panel, and within actually I'm also leaving the main panel blank because I have to call now first within server to call some objects within my sidebar layout and within main panel. So therefore I will be going to create a server function of RSHINY now. So I will be creating now I will create shiny server function, and within that, as usual, we will start from shiny server, and after that shiny server I will be creating an object. Again, you can name it whatever. I usually call it as server, and then I will be assigning a function to it, and this function will be having two inputs: input, which will be coming from our user interface, and an output which will be computed within this server. And after that I'll be using curly brackets in which I will use all of my server functionalities here. So the first thing is that I would like to do that I first want to create a reactive function which will return a data structure, and so whatever option the user will be taking from select input will be captured and through that reactive function, and then it will be assigned to the objects that I will create. The object name that I want to give will be called as my data, and after that I will be using reactive function. And within the reactive function, what I will do is that I will be using a function read.csv to import the data set. So, and the file name actually is that I want to get for my data is that will be called as, so in order to import the dataset here, I will be using the paste function, which will print the file name. So the first part of my file name is this car underscore data or employment underscore data, and I can call it from this select input. So therefore what I will do, I will be saying input $data, and the second part of my file is which is named as .csv, and the last thing that I like to mention is the separator between these two objects is nothing. So for this I will be saying separator is equal to nothing. So what this reactive function will do, it will import the data according to my selection and will assign it to this object, my data. So the next thing that I would like to do now is now the time then where we will be using a render user interface. So what is mean by render user interface? That as you guys know that I want to make my user interface dynamic. So in order to make that dynamic, this is a bit new thing that we have never done it before. So what I will do here to make my dashboard user interface dynamic, I will be creating an output object output dollar, and then suppose I want to name it as out underscore war underscore x, because I want my x-axis will change according to the selection of the data. So therefore, and now the important thing that when I'm assigning here is, so here after assigning I will be using a function that I have never used before, which is render user interface. And within the render user interface, I will be using a user interface function, which we mention on user interface, but because we are saying render user interface, therefore we can also use user interface objects within the server. So this is a bit new thing, because most of the times whenever we use the select input, text input, we use within our user interface, but this time we'll be using the user interface function within the render UI, and which is under the server where we're defining our server computation. So after that I will be using select input, and then I want to name my select input like this is the input ID, which will be war underscore x. You can name it whatever you want. So, and comma, and then I want to label it as select the x is variable. And after that, here is an important thing, that I have to define a vector which will, based on which the user will get choices. But as the data can change, I want that my choices also get changed. Therefore, what I will do, I will be calling a function, using a function names, which let us to extract the variable names from the data. And as I have already used this reactive function, my data, so I will be just using my data, and as it is a reactive function, I will be using these two brackets to tell R that I am using a reactive function here. So what it will do, it will call this thing and it will import the data according to the selection I have made up. And so we have created a dynamic user interface by these lines actually mainly. Again, I will just copy paste this thing again for the y-axis too, and I will just update it according to y-axis. So I will create another output object which will be y, and here I will be calling it as war y, and then I will be calling it here, also change it for y. But for each x and y, the names of the variable will be coming from the data we have selected, so there is no need to make any change here. So now I have defined output variables, output var underscore x and output var y, but I want to call those variables within my sidebar layout. So in order to do that, what I will do, so I will go back to my sidebar layout, and here what I will do, I will assign them back. So I'll be using now what, in order to call them in my sidebar layout, what I will do, I will be using a new function, because we have used here render UI. So in order to call my render the user interface object which got captured here, I will be using a command name which is UI output, And within the UI output, first I will be mentioning my var_x. So I will be calling output_var_x. Copy, and here I will be mentioning it, and I will copy it again for the y-axis, because my y-axis is also dynamic, and I will change it to y here. I have one extra bracket. So now see if I execute how my dashboard will looks like. I haven't created any graph and I haven't assigned it into main panel yet. It's still incomplete, but let's see if I execute my code. I just want to check that do I get any error or everything is working fine. Control enter. So actually I also, in order to execute it, I also have to write down a function RSHINY app to execute the dashboard, and within that I will be calling the object which I have created above, UI for user interface and server for computations. Now everything is ready. I say Control A, Control Enter. Got an error. UI not found. Just give me a minute, let me see if I am having any error. Sorry, I got an error because I have repeatedly written down sidebar layout in the start, which is right, but here again I have write down sidebar layout, which is wrong. I have to write down the function sidebar panel. So now suppose if I execute my code, hopefully I will not get any error. So enter. So as you can see, we don't have any graph appearing here because, and that I will do it afterwards. So we will construct dynamic UI as a title, and you can see here by default the car_data got selected, and you can see the variable which are coming from this data set. And for y-axis also we have variables which are coming from this data set. But let's see that these variable names got updated if I change my data set. So if I select my employment_data, you can see that the data set, the variable names got updated for both x-axis variable and both for y-axis variable. So it's mean everything is going fine. I will go back to my coding and I will start here, and here what I will do, I need to create an object which I will be then assigning within my main panel, the output object, and that object will be the graph. So I will be creating a graph. So in order to create a graph, I will be start with the output, and I will create a new object $, and I will be calling it as employment plot. I think it's better to say a data plot. You can name it whatever you want because the data keeps on changing and the R plot will be also keeps on changing. So after that I will be using again assign, and after assign function I will be using a render plot function. And within the render plot, I will be first, in order to draw a graph, I need some data. So in order to call a data, I will be creating a data object named as data. Again, you can name it whatever you want, and that data set will be coming from my reactive function. So I will be using my data, and I'm using this brackets to tell R that I'm using a reactive function. Calling a reactive function here, and then whatever the objects that reactive function have will be assigned to this data. And then after that I will be using a command which is named as attach. I will be using attach. Attach will add the data name, this data object name, to all the variables when I will be using my plot function. So it will be a bit easier for me to call the variables there. So I will be using attach data. So whenever I will be mentioning any variable name, it will automatically attach this data sets. Because if you guys remember, if we have to call, suppose if there is a price variable within this data object, then you must have to write like this data $price. So then R will come to know that this price variable is coming from this data. So I'm just writing this down to give you an example. After that, I will be using a plot function. And the first thing that I need to mention within the plot function is the x-axis. So in order to have the x-axis, I will be using a function get. So let's see if I don't use this get function. So if I just call it like input $r var x. So if I write down my x-axis like this, what it will happen, the R will not recognize that I'm calling the variable. It will just print whatever the value it will be having under var_x. In order to tell R that it's a variable or it's some objects within my R environment, so you have to use this function get. Close like this. After that, I have to mention my x variable. So I will just copy the same command and I will be using this again. I will change it to y because I also have created y input variable. And after that, I have to label my x-axis. So in order to label them properly, I will be using the x label is equal to paste. And paste whatever we have the variable name within these objects. In the same way, I will do for y. Again, I have created an object which is named as data_plot. But in order to tell R that this plot must have to appear in our main panel, I have to mention within this main panel function, which is in my user interface. And now let's see if I execute this code, Control A and then Control Enter. So I think I got something. Oh, sorry. So I have mentioned down here, but I have to mention that it's a plot output. So I'll be saying plot output so this is the plot output. Control A, Control Enter. And now you can see we have a plot which is between price and price, and that's why it's a straight line. But you can change the variable. As you can see, as you change the variable, your plot got updated. And in the same way, you can also change the dataset. So once your dataset got changed, the variables got changed. You can select any variable population. So you can see that your user interface becomes dynamic, and it depends on the option which you are selecting based on the depth from here. So now not only your graphs are dynamic, your even options are also dynamic, and they keeps on changing according to the selections that you are making. So in this video, we have covered how you can make a dynamic user interface through a very basic example. Thank you for watching the video.